Just a magnificent looking animal. It was only 3 meters long. It didn't have a mark on it. And gave us an opportunity to tag it. And he placed his tag perfect.
In 2003, off the coast of Australia, scientists tagged a healthy 500-pound great white shark and watched it disappear into the open ocean. 4 months later, the tracking tag washed ashore on a beach, but the shark never did. The data stored inside the tag revealed a story that seemed impossible. This great white, an apex predator with virtually no natural enemies, had been swallowed whole and dragged nearly 2,000 feet into the freezing depths of the ocean. Something had eaten it, and it would take scientists years to determine what creature was large enough to do it. If you love unbelievable ocean mysteries and true stories that sound impossible, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next one might be even more shocking. Let's dive into the mystery. The shark that disappeared. Let us go back to the beginning. The year is 2003. A team of marine researchers working off the coast of South Australia tags a healthy 9-foot female great white shark as part of a long-term tracking study. 9 feet is not small, by the way. A 9-foot great white weighs somewhere in the region of 500 pounds. This is not a juvenile. This is a fully grown, fully capable apex predator. The kind of animal that sits at the very top of the ocean's food chain and has done so for roughly 11 million years. The tag attached to this shark was what researchers call a data logger. It is a device that records depth, water temperature, light levels, and movement. It is not a live transmitter broadcasting in real time. It stores information and then, when it eventually detaches and floats to the surface, it transmits that stored data to a satellite. Scientists collect the recorder, download the data, and piece together a picture of where the shark went and what it experienced. 4 months after the tag was attached, it washed ashore. The research team downloaded the data, expecting the usual routine diving patterns, temperature fluctuations, movement across the shark's known range. What they got instead was something that stopped the entire project in its tracks. The data showed the tag descending rapidly, not gradually, the way a shark dives when it is hunting or exploring, rapidly. Nearly 2,000 feet in minutes. Then the temperature reading changed, and this is where it gets deeply strange. The recorded temperature jumped to 95 degrees Fahrenheit and stayed there. Not briefly, sustained. For a marine researcher, that combination of readings tells one very specific story. The tag was no longer in the ocean. It was inside something warm, something alive, something that had dived to extreme depth, carrying the tag and the shark it was attached to inside its stomach. The lead researcher on the project, a scientist named Rachel Donoghue, later described the moment she saw that data as one of the most unsettling experiences of her scientific career. Not because the data was inexplicable, but because of what it implied. What we know about great white sharks. Here is what I need you to fully appreciate before we go any further, because I think most people understand intellectually that great white sharks are dangerous without really feeling the weight of what that means biologically. Great white sharks are not just big fish with sharp teeth. They are the product of millions of years of evolutionary refinement. They can grow to 20 feet in length and weigh over 5,000 pounds. They can detect a single drop of blood diluted across 100 liters of water. They can sense the electromagnetic fields produced by a beating heart through solid sand. They swim at speeds of up to 35 miles per hour in short bursts. Their teeth are serrated, replaceable, and arranged in multiple rows. When one tooth breaks or wears down, another rotates forward to replace it. They are, in the most literal sense of the word, a killing machine that the ocean spent millions of years perfecting. And here is the thing about apex predators that people sometimes forget. It is not just about size or teeth, it is about the ecological position they occupy. apex predators do not have natural predators of their own. That is the definition. They sit at the top of the chain and nothing hunts them. Scientists had long accepted this as simply true for great white sharks in the open ocean. Yes, orcas had been observed harassing great whites in specific locations. Yes, there were occasional documented conflicts between large sharks, but outright predation, a creature that actively hunted, killed, and consumed a great white shark, that was not in the model, which is exactly what makes what the data recorder revealed so significant and so genuinely disturbing. The data that made no sense. Let me walk you through exactly what those numbers meant, because I think when you understand the physics of what was actually recorded on that tag, the whole thing becomes significantly harder to process. And I say that as someone who has spent years reading marine biology research and thought he was reasonably difficult to rattle. The first number? Depth. The tag descended to nearly 2,000 feet. Now, I need you to appreciate why that single reading was already alarming before researchers even got to anything else. Great white sharks are not deep-water animals by nature. This is a species that evolved to hunt in coastal shallows, in open ocean surface waters, in the productive upper layers of the water column where sunlight penetrates and prey is abundant. They operate primarily within the top 1,000 feet. That is their world. That is where they feed, where they breed, where they spend the overwhelming majority of their lives. An abrupt descent to 2,000 feet is not normal great white behavior. It is not a foraging dive. It is not an exploratory movement. When you see a data tag record, that kind of rapid, extreme depth change in a matter of minutes. There are very few explanations available to you. The shark was not diving voluntarily. Something was taking it down, carrying it down. And whatever was carrying it was a powerful enough swimmer to descend to 2,000 feet, quickly, efficiently, and apparently without much difficulty. That alone should have been enough to make the research team deeply uncomfortable. But then they looked at the second number, temperature. This is the reading that confirmed everything. That turned a strange anomaly into an unavoidable conclusion. At 2,000 feet depth off the coast of Australia, the ocean is cold. Not refreshing to swim cold. Genuinely, profoundly cold. Water temperatures at that depth in that region sit somewhere between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Dark, pressurized, frigid water. If the tag had simply detached from the shark and sunk, or if the shark had died and the tag had drifted down with the carcass, that is the temperature you would expect to see recorded. 40 degrees, maybe 45 degrees. Cold water gets slightly colder as depth increases. Instead, the temperature reading spiked to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And it did not spike briefly. It did not flash upward for a moment and then drop back down, as you might expect from some kind of equipment malfunction or environmental anomaly. It held sustained, stable 95 degrees at 2,000 feet below the surface of the Southern Ocean. There is only one explanation for that reading. Only one scenario in which a data tag records a sustained temperature of 95 degrees while sitting at 2,000 feet of depth in cold ocean water. The tag was no longer in the ocean. It was inside something with a warm interior, something biological, something alive that had swallowed the shark, tag, and all, and then descended to 2,000 feet with its meal still inside it. I want you to sit with that for a moment, the way I had to when I first understood what those two numbers meant together. Something in the waters off Australia swallowed a 500-pound great white shark whole, dove to 2,000 feet, and then came back up and continued on with its life. And not a single person on the surface of that ocean saw any of it. No dorsal fin, no surface disturbance, no photograph, no witness, nothing. It was just there, moving through the water, doing something we did not think anything in that ocean was capable of doing. And the only reason we know it happened at all is because a small plastic data recorder washed up on a beach 4 months later, carrying the only evidence that any of it was real. The question that consumed the research team for the next decade was the obvious one, the one that I suspect is consuming you right now. What on earth was it? The suspects. When the data was first analyzed and the predation hypothesis was confirmed, scientists began working through every possible candidate. And I want to take you through this process because it is genuinely fascinating to watch how each theory collapsed one by one. The first suspect was the orca, killer whales. We know orcas can kill great white sharks. This is documented. There is footage of it. Orcas, in specific regions, particularly off the coast of South Africa and in parts of the Pacific, have developed a hunting technique where they flip great whites upside down, inducing a state of tonic immobility, and then consume the shark's liver. It is efficient, brutal, and impressive, even by ocean standards. But the orca theory fell apart almost immediately when researchers looked at the depth data. Orcas are not deep divers. They operate near the surface. The deepest recorded orca dive is just under 1,000 feet, and that is extraordinary. An orca does not casually descend to 2,000 feet with a shark in its stomach. The physiology does not support it. Strike one. The second suspect was the sperm whale. Now, here is an animal that genuinely dives to extreme depths. Sperm whales regularly descend to 7,000 feet in pursuit of giant squid. They are the deep divers of the ocean mammal world, and they are enormous. A large male sperm whale can reach 60 feet in length and weigh over 100,000 pounds. Could a sperm whale have consumed a great white shark? Physically, yes. A sperm whale's throat is large enough to swallow a shark whole, but the temperature data did not fit. Sperm whales are mammals. They are warm-blooded. Their internal temperature runs around 97 to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. The recorded temperature of 95 degrees is slightly lower than what you would expect from inside a sperm whale's stomach. Not impossibly lower, but inconsistent enough to give researchers pause. And behaviorally, sperm whales are not known to hunt sharks. Their diet is almost exclusively cephalopods, squid, not sharks. Strike two. Researchers then considered the possibility of a large oceanic white-tip shark, or a tiger shark. Both species are known to be aggressive and opportunistic. Tiger sharks, in particular, will eat almost anything, but neither species grows large enough to consume a 9-foot great white. The largest confirmed tiger shark on record is around 14 feet. To consume a 9-foot great white whole, you would need something significantly bigger than your prey. The math simply did not work. Strike three. There was even a brief, somewhat embarrassing period where a fringe theory circulated, suggesting a massive squid might have been responsible. A colossal squid, theoretically large enough to drag a shark to depth. I will be honest with you, that theory did not last long. The temperature reading alone ruled out a cold-blooded invertebrate. Strike four. One by one, every conventional candidate was eliminated. And as the suspect list narrowed, researchers were left staring at a possibility that was, in equal measure, obvious and almost too strange to accept. The real culprit was revealed. What if the predator was another great white shark? Not just any great white shark, not a slightly larger specimen that got lucky in a territorial dispute, but a great white shark of a size that most marine biologists had never seriously considered. A shark so large that a 9-foot, 500-pound great white was simply a meal. Let me explain how researchers arrived at this conclusion, because it was not a guess. It was a process of elimination combined with some genuinely remarkable scientific reasoning. The temperature reading of 95 degrees Fahrenheit is the key. Unlike mammals, sharks are generally ectothermic, cold-blooded. Their body temperature matches the surrounding water, except that is not entirely true for great white sharks. Great whites belong to a family called the Lamnidae, the mackerel sharks, and they possess a remarkable adaptation called regional endothermy. They can generate and retain body heat in specific parts of their body, particularly around their muscles, eyes, and brain. This allows them to maintain core body temperatures significantly above the surrounding water. In cold, deep water, the interior of a large great white shark's stomach could plausibly sustain a temperature around 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The depth of nearly 2,000 feet is also consistent with great white shark behavior in ways that researchers initially overlooked. Great whites are capable of far deeper dives than their typical range suggests. They have been tracked descending to over 3,000 feet in open ocean environments. The dive recorded by the data logger, while extreme, was not outside the physiological capability of a very large great white. But here is the question that everyone kept circling back to. How large does a great white shark need to be to consume a 9-foot specimen? Researchers who have studied shark predation dynamics suggest that for one great white to successfully prey upon another, the predator would need to be roughly twice the length of the prey. To consume a 9-foot shark, you would be looking at a great white somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 feet, possibly larger. The kind of size that sits right at the outer edge of what we believe great white sharks can reach. Now, here is where it gets genuinely unsettling. There are credible historical accounts dating back decades of great white sharks that reached sizes far beyond what appears in the modern scientific record. Commercial fishermen, naval officers, and researchers in the mid-20th century reported encounters with sharks estimated at 20 feet or more. For a long time, these accounts were treated with skepticism, big fish stories, exaggerated memories. But what if they were not exaggerated? What if the ocean contains great white sharks of a size we have simply never managed to tag, study, or photograph? Animals that spend most of their time in the deep open ocean, away from coastlines, away from research vessels, away from the shallow water environments where we do almost all of our shark observation. The research team concluded that the most likely predator of the tagged shark was a female great white shark of exceptional size. Female great whites grow significantly larger than males. The largest confirmed female great whites on record approach 20 feet in length and weigh in excess of 4,000 pounds. But confirmation of this came not just from the data analysis. It came from something researchers noticed when they compared the tag data to tracking records from other sharks in the same region. In the months following the disappearance of the tagged shark, a separate tracking system recorded the movement of a large untagged animal moving through the same area. The movement patterns, the dive profiles, the territorial range, all of it was consistent with an enormous female great white shark. A shark that nobody had ever formally documented. A shark that the ocean had simply never introduced to science before. She had been there the whole time, moving through those waters, doing what apex predators do. And one morning in 2003, she had eaten a 9-foot great white shark for breakfast and dived to 2,000 feet to digest it. I genuinely do not know how to make that sound less alarming than it is. So, I am not going to try. The deeper, more disturbing truth. Here is the part of this story that nobody talks about because the headline is irresistible. A massive great white eating another great white whole. That is the kind of information that makes you cancel your Australia trip, stare at the ocean from a very safe distance, and reconsider every life choice that ever brought you near open water. Totally understandable. I am not judging anyone. But the headline is actually the least disturbing part because once researchers confirmed what had happened to that tagged shark In 2003, they did something that scientists always do when they stumble onto something unexpected. They went back through the historical record and started looking for patterns they had previously ignored. And what they found was deeply unsettling in a way that goes far beyond one dramatic predation event off the coast of Australia. Great white shark on great white shark predation is not a freak occurrence. It is not a one-in-a-million collision between two animals in the wrong place at the wrong time. It is a behavior with a paper trail, a long one. Mid-20th century fishing and research records contain multiple accounts of large great whites hauled up or observed bearing massive bite wounds, wounds with the specific arc, spacing, and serration pattern that could only come from the jaws of another great white. For decades, these records were filed away under territorial aggression, sharks fighting over food. Nobody seriously entertained the possibility that what they were actually documenting was predation. Then, in 1997, a research vessel working off the Farallon Islands near San Francisco watched a large great white get attacked and physically displaced from a whale carcass by a visibly larger great white. Not competing, not posturing, attacking with intent, and driving the smaller animal away in a state of clear distress. In 2009, a formal study published across multiple marine biology journals documented evidence of intraspecies predation among great whites at several sites across the Pacific. In 2022, researchers working off South Africa found a group of great whites carrying identical parallel bite wounds. Same depth, same spacing, same origin. Each taken individually, you can explain any one of these incidents away. Territorial dispute, competition over resources, two apex predators having a bad day in close proximity. Scientists are professionally trained to resist dramatic conclusions from isolated data points, and rightly so. But you cannot look at the full body of evidence, stretch it across 70 years of recorded observations across multiple ocean basins, add the 2003 tag data on top of it, and still call this territorial aggression. The picture that emerges is something else entirely. The very largest great white sharks do not merely compete with smaller ones, they eat them. This is apex predation happening inside an apex species. The food chain that everyone assumed terminated at the great white shark does not terminate there at all. It keeps going upward into size ranges that marine science has barely begun to seriously investigate. Which means the chart we drew, the one with the great white at the top and everything else arranged neatly below it, is incomplete. And if we got that wrong about the most studied, most filmed, most famous predator in the ocean, the question that follows is one that should keep every marine biologist awake at night. What else are we wrong about? Why do we almost never see it? There is a reason this behavior stayed hidden for so long. Several reasons, actually. And understanding them tells you something important about the limits of marine science and how much of the ocean we are genuinely blind to. The first reason is geography. The open ocean is incomprehensibly vast. The Pacific Ocean alone covers 60 million square miles. The total surface area of all the world's oceans combined is 139 million square miles. Of that, we have meaningfully explored perhaps 5%. Not studied in detail, just explored. Passed through with instruments. The deep open ocean, the pelagic zone below 1,000 feet, is, for most practical purposes, completely invisible to us. Whatever happens down there, we do not see it. The second reason is tagging coverage. This is something I do not think most people appreciate. For all the shark research that has been conducted over the past 50 years, the total number of great white sharks that have ever been successfully tagged and tracked is relatively small. Estimates suggest there are somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 great white sharks in the world's oceans. The number that have ever carried a functioning data tag is a fraction of that. we are making sweeping conclusions about the behavior and ecology of a species based on observations of a tiny sample. The third reason is size bias. When researchers tag great white sharks, they typically work in coastal areas where sharks come close to shore. The sharks available for tagging in these environments tend to be younger, smaller animals. The very largest great whites, the 20-foot-plus females that may be responsible for the kind of predation we are discussing, tend to spend more time in the deep open ocean. They are simply not where the researchers are. It is like trying to understand the behavior of African elephants by only studying the calves that wander near the edge of the park. Put all of this together, and you get a situation where the most ecologically significant behavior of one of the ocean's most famous species has been completely invisible to science. Not because it was rare, but because we were not in the right place with the right equipment at the right time, looking in the right direction. The ocean is better at keeping secrets than we are at uncovering them. What this changes. The identification of a large female great white shark as the predator responsible for the 2003 disappearance is not just a satisfying conclusion to a compelling mystery. It has real, substantive implications for how marine biologists understand ocean ecology and apex predator dynamics. The first and most immediate implication involves conservation modeling. Great white sharks are a protected species in many parts of the world. Conservation strategies for the species are built on population beds that assume the primary threats to great white sharks are human activity, specifically fishing, finning, and habitat degradation. Those models do not account for intraspecies predation as a meaningful mortality factor. If very large great whites regularly prey upon smaller great whites, the population dynamics are more complex than current models capture. The survival rate assumptions are wrong. The recovery projections could be wrong. The second implication involves what scientists call trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is what happens when a change at the top of a food chain ripples downward through every level beneath it. We already know that the presence or absence of great white sharks dramatically affects the behavior and distribution of their prey species, seals, sea lions, smaller sharks, and various fish populations. If intraspecies predation is reshaping the size distribution of the great white shark population by selectively removing smaller individuals, then the cascade effects could be significant and entirely unaccounted for in existing ecosystem models. The third implication is perhaps the most philosophically unsettling. We have long used the great white shark as our mental anchor for ocean apex predation. When we think of the top of the food chain in the ocean, we think of the great white. It is the benchmark, the ceiling. But if the great white shark is itself subject to predation from within its own species, then the ceiling is not where we thought it was. The apex is not fixed. It is size-dependent and dynamic in ways we did not fully appreciate. And that raises a question that I find genuinely fascinating and genuinely troubling in equal measure. Are there other animals in the ocean, apex predators in their own right, that are subject to the same dynamic? Are there animals we currently classify as apex predators that are actually prey to larger, deeper, rarer members of their own species? Animals we have never tagged, never photographed, never formally documented? The honest answer, based on everything the 2003 incident revealed, is that we do not know. And not knowing is not a comfortable place to be when we are making conservation decisions that affect entire ecosystems. Here is what I keep coming back to when I think about this story. We name that shark, not the great white that was eaten, the other one, the predator. Researchers who studied the tag data and the movement patterns in the years that followed informally called her the deep blue candidate, a reference to deep blue, the largest great white shark ever reliably photographed. A female estimated at 20 feet long and filmed off the coast of Mexico in 2013. Whether the shark responsible for the 2003 predation event and the shark later filmed as Deep Blue are one and the same animal, nobody knows for certain. The ocean does not give up its residents for easy identification, but I think that ambiguity is actually the most important part of the story because we tend to think of the ocean as something we understand. We have mapped it, we have named it, we have divided it into zones and biomes and ecological categories. We have given everything in it a Latin name and a place on a chart. And we look at that chart and we feel like we know what is in the water. We do not. The ocean contains animals we have never seen, behaviors we have never observed, ecological relationships we have never documented. The 2003 disappearance of that tagged great white shark is a reminder that the largest wilderness on Earth is still, in the most profound sense, unknown. The data recorder washed ashore like a message in a bottle, a note from the deep. Something is down here that you did not know about, something bigger than you thought, something that eats your apex predators for lunch and dives to 2,000 feet to do it. The great white shark spent 11 million years becoming the most feared predator in the ocean. And somewhere in those dark, cold waters off the coast of Australia, something looked at it and saw a meal. The ocean is not the place we think it is. The food chain does not end where we drew the line. And the next data recorder that washes ashore might tell us something even harder to absorb than this one did. Whatever is down there, it is not waiting for us to discover it. It is just living its life in the deep and in the dark, doing exactly what it has always done, long before we were watching and long after we stopped. That is the truth about what ate the great white shark. And honestly, I think it is only the beginning.